It's December 20th, and I'm Sam Snikovsky, coming to you from Swampscott, Massachusetts. I am with Representative-elect Jennifer Armini, who will represent Massachusetts' 8th Essex District on Beacon Hill following her inauguration on January 4th, 2023. Welcome to Swampscott High School.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. I've got several questions on environmentalism, public schools, and a couple questions about you.
Let's go.
All right. Question 1. During your campaign, you emphasized the need to protect Massachusetts' environment as a priority, alongside schools, affordability, and reproductive rights. How will you make sure that environmental policy is at the forefront of your term, and how can residents within our district check in on you to see your progress?
Well, we are so fortunate here in Massachusetts because we have already created a roadmap for getting to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That is a piece of legislation that passed in March of 2021. So that kind of set the table. Right. And then in last August of 2022, we passed a second bill that I'll say put food on the table and is giving us the tools to actually get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So the charge of the next session of the legislature is to continue to provide these tools, whether it's more electric charging stations for cars, whether it's electrifying transportation, whether it's giving more communities the opportunity to have net zero building codes. It's all a process, and that's what I'm so excited to work on.
Okay. And actually, I know you just mentioned with building codes with like local communities,
right?
Which kind of brings me to my second question, which is that I saw on your campaign website the first action on your list of methods to address climate change was actually to quote foster resilient communities. And Swampscott itself, we actually have a climate committee here. So I was just wondering, how can we make sure that local areas are receiving state resources for their plans?
Right. Well, that's part of my job. It is to coordinate with our communities. Groups like that are vital because they provide on-the-ground information to policymakers so we know exactly what our communities need. There has to be a give and take, and that's about building relationships in the community. And you asked how the community will be able to check in with me on these issues. I am going to have an incredibly accessible office. People can contact me at any time. I will be doing monthly office hours in Swampscott, in Marblehead, in Lynn. So I have an open door policy, and constant communication is the way I like to work.
Yeah, and that's great. And actually, I'm just wondering a bit more specifically. So let's say, for instance, like Swampscott, we have a climate committee. How could like individual committees reach out for either like state resources or even state funds? Like, is there a process for them to get grants or other sorts of?
Well, right. So, but that's where what I want those committees to do, what I'm going to do with them, is figure out what their priorities are. What are their asks, and then I can liaison with the state agencies to make sure that if they are up for a grant, they know that their state representative, the agency knows their state representative supports this grant, and it's my job to push for it. So it's really working together. Right. They may identify something, I may identify something, so that's how it works.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. And also earlier, I know you mentioned electric vehicles, right, like EVs.
Yes.
And I was actually wondering, how much money do you think like individual rebates should be for an EV? And in total, how much money do you think Massachusetts should be spending on more charging stations and EVs, given our budgets? And
so, in the last climate bill that I referenced that passed in August, the amount was boosted. The amount of subsidy rebates was boosted to, I believe, $6,500 at the state level. Okay. So combine, and you can combine the state with the federal subsidies. And if you are low income, you actually get an extra $1,000. So I think all told, the subsidy is around $10,000 if you choose to purchase an electric vehicle.
Okay.
We can continue to boost that subsidy to encourage purchasing and also help people who are low income and we can boost their subsidy. So maybe instead of 1,000 in this session, we make it 1,500. You know, we've got to see how it's working.
Right.
Are the subsidies working? And then here we are putting more electric vehicles on the road. We better have the charging stations to make sure you're not out in Sturbridge getting stuck. So that is an ongoing process, right? And then also to make sure that the electric grid can keep up with the demand.
Right. And then, I mean, that's great to hear. And then also on the level of just like climate spending, climate budgeting from the state. So how much money do you think that the state should be in total spending on these like more charging stations and giving higher subsidies or rebates to?
Right. I mean, honestly, it's tough to give you like, we should be spending X bajillions of dollars. I honestly don't know how much we need to spend in terms of adding up all the different line items to get there. So that's a tough question to answer just because I don't have all those different line items. But what I can tell you is that the state currently spends, I believe, only like 1% of its budget on fighting climate change. We need to boost that.
Yeah.
What that boost is, that's what I'm going to work on.
Right, and that's wonderful to hear.